People come in for the fitness goal, but they stay for the community, right? And our average customer stays 3 years. So it's not like in 3 years, you're on this perfect linear projection from like non-fit to fit. I mean, you go ups and downs. Holidays come around, you get sick. So managing people through that, right, is really key.
You're tuned in to the Dr. Kinney Show, and I'm your host, Dr. Erin Kinney, a naturopathic doctor and speaker dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of your body and guiding you back into balance. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Dr. Kinney Show. This week, I'm really pleased to have joining me Rick Mayo, who's the founder and CEO of Alloy Personal Training, which was established in 1992. Rick, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so I'm really curious to learn, and I know my listeners are going to be curious to learn, like, tell us about founding this gym. I know you've got franchises all over the country, so I want to hear your story.
Yeah, so I opened my first facility, which I'm still sitting in, which is amazing to think that I'm in the same physical location that I was in 1992. But I was a junior in college, just sort of paying my way through college, and I was bouncing around. The personal training was in its infancy, by the way, in 92, if you can imagine, like no computer or anything. It was wild. Funny to think about now. But, there was a pretty high demand. It was the early innings for the industry overall. It wasn't very regulated. There wasn't many people doing it. I loved it, and it paid well. It was a great part-time gig while I was going to college. And I built up a pretty good clientele doing in-home training and working at a couple of different health clubs. And I thought, would it be cool to put four walls and a better customer experience around this really high-end service? So I opened at least what I think is certainly in Atlanta, which is my base, the first facility dedicated to just personal training. I know these days, like, boutique fitness everywhere, all kinds of options. But at the time, it was just us. And so we ran that not too long after, maybe 2-3 years later, got married, had a kid, got a mortgage. So it was like, wow, this is like a real, I can make a career out of wearing sweatpants to work. Who would have thought, right? And then we landed on this really interesting business model where we learned how to train more than one person at one time, which would bring the cost down for the consumer. But it would also increase like the adherence because you were working out with other people. So it's a little bit of the sociability of like a class-based concept, but still the specificity of personal training. And we pivoted from one-on-one training to that model in somewhere year 2000. So in a pretty short period of time, we became one of the highest revenue per square foot facilities in the country. And that put me on the radar for speaking circuit. So I started speaking all over the country at different fitness conferences about what we do, how we do it. And then people started to ask questions. So I started doing a lot of consulting, like, hey, can I do a follow-up call with you? Can I talk to you about this? I was like, sure. And the questions were very redundant, sort of like the actual thing that we do in health and fitness. There's a few questions that you get often. And so we built a platform and we started what we called licensing at the time, which was sort of a white labeled version of what we do. And we powered all kinds of different concepts from CrossFit to big family tennis centers. I mean, you name it. And we've built that to 2,500 door fronts from India, Dubai, Cyprus to Tasmania. I was traveling 42 weeks out of the year. I mean, just crazy, right? And then in 2020, we decided to pivot to full-on franchising. And so for your listeners, the difference between licensing and like powering a program in someone else's facility where they called it whatever they want. This is our name on the front door. It's not McDonald's, but just it's a recognizable, like that's the thing, right? It's a recognizable model. So that's what we do now. And in a really short period of time, because you can imagine we started franchising in 2020. Great timing as COVID hit and it's pretty much put everything on hold. Because there were states that weren't allowing any type of fitness facility to be open at all. So we put sales on hold, came back mid 2021 and we're at 300 locations and we're opening about 5 or 6 a month. So it's moving quick and it's awesome. I love it. I mean, I've never had a job. So the only thing I've ever done, I've only been an entrepreneur.
That's really cool.
It's like, I love it. And never one morning whether I was working in my facility or, franchising or traveling the world to stand on my soapbox, never once did I wake up and think, I don't want to do this, right? Every day that my feet hit the ground, I'm stoked. And probably more so now than ever, even after 34 years.
That's amazing. It's amazing to find a vocation or career that you love that much. And it's really cool. I mean, in your career, I think a lot of the guests I bring on the show, you're helping tons of people. Like you're helping them get fitter, get healthier, prevent, osteoporosis and disease and heart, all kinds of things with but I love the approach you guys have with the small group training. I think it's a really cool, and I love what you said about, obviously brings the price down for the consumer, but also it's nice to have an accountability buddy,
it is,
right?
Yes.
Like personal training one-on-one is great because obviously you have you've got your trainer accountability there, but it's nice to go with someone and you can commiserate, and your groups they're like 3-4 people, right? Is it
up to 6, and
up to
people
6.
always ask
okay.
why 6. It's like, well, we tried 8 and it felt like a class. 4, we couldn't get the price threshold down low enough, right? So it was like 6 is the sweet spot where we have really cool technology around it where everybody can get a specific program for them in a group of up to 6, and the sociability of like a class, like we talked about. So it's very unique in that. And 6 is just because anything less, and we couldn't provide the same value proposition. Anything more, it's not personal training.
Yeah. And, it's in my field, I work with a lot of men and women that are kind of going through menopause or perimenopause, and, bodies are changing. And I think it's kind of agreed upon in most professionals that building muscle mass, is really helps prevent all of the things that we get when we age. Really, really helpful for keeping weight down, but also for, protecting a lot of the body. I'm sure you can speak about this a little bit, but it's so important to be doing that. And, some people started a little too late, but it's never too late to start. But I think it's better to start these things like in 20s and 30s and start thinking about, hey, I want to be doing some lifting. I want to learn how to do this properly. And it can be daunting to do that on your own, right? Like it's nice to have someone show you, hey, what's the proper form? You can also hurt yourself, right? Maybe you can speak a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. I think, when you look at like who is our customer avatar, because the price, it's still more expensive than joining a $10 gym. Obviously it is personal training.
Yeah.
So our customer avatar is really 45 to 65 is our sweet spot. Now we certainly trend older. If somebody has the financial means and they're younger, they can certainly come in as well. And I think everybody wants something specific to them, regardless of age. But that price threshold pushes us into that age category. In that age category, to your point, there's a lot of people who are very deconditioned. Maybe they raised kids and their kids left and they look around and like, yeesh, the back half of my life, I want to travel and do some things, right? And so this customer avatar has means as well. So they can travel, they can do these things. And it's like, but are they healthy enough to do it? And so again, it's really nice to be able to provide a mechanism where they can do that. It can be specific to them based on their level of fitness. We even measure the way people move, tangible score. So it's like, if we do these certain movements, is that going to hurt them? Or can we improve these movement patterns? And most of them cross over to everyday life too. Like you pick up this, bag of cat litter in the garage or whatever those things are, right? Without hurting your back. So yes, to your point, it's very important to first do no harm, but also to your point about, we call sarcopenia, which is like kicks in around age 30 where you're losing muscle mass every year without activity. It's like, wow, it becomes the most important thing, right? It may be the most important thing. And I know like when you're like, I'm 55. So it's like, I'm in really good shape. I have relatively low body fat, but I've done it forever. So I can't imagine what it would feel like at my age to start from scratch, right? It could be terrifying. There would be high risk of injury, but the statistics show that you can definitely add lean tissue. And I'm not talking about hulking muscles. Everyone thinks that happens automatically. It doesn't. But to add some strength and lean tissue to your body, to your point, really helps your metabolism. And it really helps prevent a lot of the other things, diabetes. It regulates insulin, for that mechanism. There's so many benefits to strength training. And there's other things you need to do. Like, we have an app where we can track, wearable steps outside the gym. There's other things that have to do with being fit. But I think at the core for our avatar, which is exactly who you're working with in that sort of perimenopausal or menopausal crowd, strength training is the key. It really is. And, doing like HIIT classes all the time and raising your cortisol levels and doing all the things that's not the key, right? It's not. And so
no. It burns you out. And I always share this with my patients, that come in and they're running and they're going to HIIT and they're doing all these like high intensity workouts, which have a time and place, right? And it's great to be in cardiovascular shape, but if you're doing that all the time and your life is stressful, and let's face it, in your 40s, 50s decade, you might be taking care of kids, you're still working, you've got aging parents. There's a lot of things happening in those days. And you don't want to be spending more time in fight flight when you're already spending a lot of time in fight flight, right?
Great point.
So, I usually have my patients when they first come in, I'm like, no exercise. We're going to go down to like 2 days a week for a little bit. Let's get things balanced. And then, do some like a heavy lift will make you feel just as good as, a long run or a HIIT class. You get that same boost. And again, you're building your muscle mass up instead of breaking it down, which is what cardio can sometimes do.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself.
But let's talk a little bit more about, the psychological benefits. I think partially post-COVID, I think during COVID, we were all trying to work out at home by ourselves on Zoom stuff, which, was fine. We were doing what we could. But I think it's really also nice to be in a group setting, right? And working together.
Yeah, I think, it was funny coming out of COVID, there was, we really started getting back into the franchising probably mid 2021. And there were still versions of COVID coming out and, people were still pretty nervous about it. And so, the question I would always get is like, well, is everything going online forever, right? Because you saw like the stock value of like Peloton going through the roof. Of course, now they're not even making bicycles anymore. It went like through the roof to nothing.
It's crazy.
But I think I probably knew that intuitively, but it sounded a little self-serving to be like, well, that's not going to last. But just think about how we're wired. We're social animals. And even though technology is moving really fast, our monkey brains, for lack of better terms, are not moving that fast. We still crave real human interaction, right? Especially our customer avatar. They weren't technological natives. They were more like immigrants. We didn't get to it till later in life. So we're not even as tied to it anymore. So it's like, okay, it would be nice to see some real faces, right? And so as soon as the veil lifted and a little bit of the fear started to subside, everybody was right back in the gym. And boy, that community became stronger than ever. And like, I hate to admit it, but COVID may have been the best thing for our franchise. Because it really proved to people, the consumer, that they do like to be around other people. It's probably better to leave the house a couple of days a week. It's certainly better to get some instruction around something that could injure you, like strength training, right? And so it really helped our franchise. Ultimately, I think, as disruptive as it was, I think long-term, to your point, it really helped us.
Well, I also treat a lot of anxiety and depression and kind of things in the mental emotional sphere. And when you're spending a lot of time alone and a lot of time on screens, that does not help. It doesn't help your mood. It doesn't help the neurotransmitters in the brain. So, I think a lot of people exercise. People exercise for different reasons, but I feel like the two big ones are obviously like to stay in shape. But the other big one is for what it does for you mentally. Like, I have to exercise or I go crazy, right? So, but I think what some people don't realize is that when you go to a class or a group setting is, yes, you're getting that mental boost from the actual exercise, but you're also getting that like, hey, good job. It's like a camaraderie that you're getting. And you don't find that too many other places in life, right? I mean, maybe if you've got a great office setting where you're like working together or you play a sport, but we don't really get that as adults very much, right? That like, oh, hey, we did this together. Or we we all like made it through that really tough workout or whatever it is. Like, and that's a really nice feeling.
Agreed. And I think I took a Harvard course online. I didn't go to Harvard, just to be clear. That's funny. I graduated from like a 6-week course and I posted it as a joke. I'm like, I graduated from Harvard finally. Nice. It was called Innovative Disruption. And it was basically about, one of the concepts was, what is the job to be done? Meaning, what do you really do for people? So when I looked at our business, it would be easy to say like, we get people in the best shape of their lives. It's like, okay, yes, but what are we really doing? And when you look at like our success stories, of which we have thousands and thousands, people come in for the fitness goal, but they stay for the community, right? And our average customer stays 3 years. So it's not like in 3 years, you're on this perfect linear projection from like non-fit to fit. I mean, you go ups and downs. Holidays come around, you get sick, family member, to your point. So managing people through that, right, is really key. And that mental aspect of having those other people in the group, right, where they can relate to each other. They're holding each other accountable. There's some fun banter between coach and customer. That really does become key. And I mean, look at like say the blue zones all over the world where people live to be, hundreds of years old. It's not even really diet, because you look at them, sometimes it's like Sardinia. They're eating all pasta. And now granted, it's quality food that they gardened themselves and made from scratch. But in Okinawa, they're having like vegetables or whatever. So it's not even that. One of the components that's consistent across the board is friends and family, right? They all have a strong social circle. So to your point, it's one thing to be fit, but to be mentally fit, you've got to get out and connect with people. And so a lot of our mechanisms in our franchise business are driven, and they're built not just for physical, to your point, not the physical benefit. That's kind of a given. If you do resistance training and you do cardiovascular training, your body's response is to get you in, air quoting, better shape, right? But the mental aspect is even more important. And we put a lot of soft systems in place to make sure that we are connecting people and there is community. We're doing client events outside of the club and all the things that we know are the real reasons that people stay long term. And it's super important. You're right.
Well, and I think it's great. You're doing that on two fronts. One, you're obviously providing the community, which is fantastic, but it's keeping people wanting to go to the gym, which, and I always tell my patients, like, when we're trying to achieve any health goal, consistency is key.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you've got to be consistent to really affect major change in the body. Like, if you're trying to sculpt your abs or sculpt your arms, it takes a while to do that, right? Like, and it takes being consistent with whatever you're trying. So I think you having all that community is like helping. I mean, it makes my job so much easier because my patients that are consistent with exercise, they tend to get better, right? And as we talked about, it's going to prevent diabetes. It's going to help my aging women with osteoporosis. Like, it helps. It gets more blood flow to the brain. It helps them feel less anxious and less depressed. So, I think you guys doing that again, you're helping people on multiple levels there.
Well, I appreciate that. And fantastic. Again, 34 years, I've never woken up and thought, I don't want to do this, because the why is so compelling. To finish my thought on the Harvard course, because as usual, I talk myself right off of my topic. In the concept was jobs to be done. And so we decided, like, it's fitness, but we're really building community, right? And so by default, then you look at maybe your competitors, like, where else can you get community? It's like, well, church. You could be in a book club. You can grab wine with your girlfriends. You can grab coffee with your buddies, whatever those things are. And so what are they doing in those other business models to attract and keep people from a community standpoint? And it's like, all right, well, then we should put as much effort into that in our franchise model as we do the fitness component. Because if we're going to keep people, we're going to build this community, which we've both stated, it's great for mental health. We need to know who else we're competing against, where people can get community. So let's put more juice into that. So a lot of our systems, again, are built for driving this connection, human to human connection and community, while also providing a great specific solution for people that need some help with their fitness.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I'm really excited. You guys just opened one for my Maryland listeners. One just opened in Edgewater. Do you have other locations in Maryland?
We do. I'm trying to think of where. Actually, the owner in Edgewater has one in Bethesda. I think he's got 4 or 5 locations. And so that's close to Annapolis, right?
Yeah, the Edgewater one's really close to us. So, and actually one of my health coaches. Well? Yeah, I'm in Annapolis as well. Yeah.
My son went to the Naval Academy, so I used to be up there all the time.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah. We're actually, I was going to mention this. We're doing a little cross promotion with the Edgewater location. So my patients and listeners will get 10% off if you sign up during the month of September.
Fantastic.
And if you're listening to this or you're already a member, you get some discounts with us as well. You can go to our social media and you can find more information about that. Or if you're not on my email list, you can grab that and we'll send you some stuff about it.
Can I just brag on you just for a second? Like,
sure.
Yeah, you're like, okay, it's fine. If you must.
Totally, I love it. Brag on me.
Listen, there's not enough. I think it's coming, but there's not enough people trying to get ahead of this health crisis, right? When you look at the levels of obesity or whatnot. So the fact that you are taking your expertise and applying it to the front end of this formula, right? Like, how can we keep you healthy? How can we prevent diabetes, right? How can we, because most of our system is set up for sick care and it's too late. Even when we have franchisees that come in that are looking at the opportunity to buy an alloy or several as a business model, they all have these altruistic reasons as well. And a lot of them are physicians that are like, I was an oncologist.
Oh, cool.
I'm tired of treating sick people. Like, I'd love to get on the front end of this formula and try to prevent some of these things for people. And so props to you for doing it. I think we're just on the front edge of where this thing might end up for everyone. And I love the fact that we have a location, and hopefully more in the future, we'll have doctors like yourself that are close by. Because I think this marriage of like, hey, we're the accountability tool for these things that need to be done. There's a lot of other things that need to be done to be healthy. It could be hormone treatment, it could be whatever it is that you guys are into. Yeah. But I really appreciate that you're doing what you do. And I think it's just the front edge of where this thing is headed ultimately.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, similar to you, not too many days where I wake up and I'm not excited to go and like do any part of my job. Cause even sometimes I wake up and I'm not in a great mood, but as soon as I come and I like help one person, or I know I've put content out there that's like help people like learn something, how they can better their lives. It feels good, right? It feels good to help.
It's self-serving. I always
people
say,
feel
like,
better.
Hey, selfishly, like this is the greatest gig ever because I mean, like we're having our first annual conference coming up in the fall. And one thing that we did is we highlighted a couple of clients. We had the individual locations like write in and nominate a customer and tell their story. And then as a team, we chose 2 and we sent a film crew out and filmed their whole story, them in their homes, what it means to their family members, the owners of the clubs that they're in. And then we are flying them out to conference and showing their video and then having them come up on stage. And it's like, it is the coolest thing.
Oh, that's cool.
That's the coolest thing ever. And so like, that's the why, to your point. It's like, some days You don't really feel like it, but boy, if you can just put your shoes on and get there, it fills me up as much as I'm helping someone else, maybe even more so, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It feels good to help others. It feels really good to help others.
Yeah, that's it. Mic drop.
And thank you for the shout out or the props. Can we talk about your routine?
Sure.
Clearly you are, have built this kind of like an empire, it sounds like. Can you talk about like, what do you do to stay healthy? What's your fitness routine look like? What is just all the things you do?
Sure. So I kind of follow what we consider to be the current protocol for anti-aging, right? So it's strength first. So I do strength training 3 days a week. So I'm not in the gym for hours. I'm maybe 45 minutes to an hour, 3 days a week. And you can't tell by looking at me now, but I'm 6'2", 225. I have less than 10% body fat. I'm like in really good shape. And I don't really do a lot. To your point earlier about consistency, I always get 3 days a week of strength training. I do full body routine. So I'm not doing like a bodybuilding split. I don't have time for that. Right. And it turns out you don't need it, by the way. I walk every morning with a couple of buddies. So that's like my community, right? We all have dogs and we meet and do this like 3 mile hike and pick on each other and get our sort of community there and play with the dogs. Nice. And it's just so nice. So I do that every morning. So that's 5 days a week, when I'm in town. And then 1 day a week, I get my heart rate really high. And so I'll come in and do like a 10-minute interval session on like an air bike, right? Like the Schwinn Airdyne bike for your listeners, or the assault bike, whatever you want to call it these days. But those things are really awful, by the way. But they don't beat you up too much, right? And you can really get a high heart rate. So I'll come in and do maybe 1 day a week of really high heart rate, because VO2 max is also a great predictor of longevity. So lean mass, check. Lots of moving at a low pace, great for your heart health. Great. I get my sociability with a walk, check. I get my high heart rate once a week, check. But the total investment of my time is really not that high.
Not very much.
And I'm not in the gym that much. I mean, walking with buddies, right? That's not even like a workout, really. I mean,
it doesn't. Yeah, that doesn't feel like a workout. That's fun. That's feeding your soul
or something. But to your point, it feeds your soul. So it's really 2 birds with 1 stone. So that's pretty much it. As far as eating, the only hack that has really worked for me is just try to keep my protein intake relatively high. And for me, just to keep it simple, it doesn't have to be for everyone. I think the general line of thinking is like, a gram per pound of lean body weight. I just eat a gram per pound of my weight. So if I try to eat 225 grams of protein a day, I am so full that it doesn't leave room for lots of junk. Like anything I often laugh, I'll get to the end of the day and I'm like, ooh, I want some ice cream, and then I'll think and I'm like, oh, I have to have another protein shake, or something to get this last 40 grams of protein. So I'll have that first. And then I'm like, well, I'll eat some ice cream after. And I'll never want it because I'm like, oh, I'm so full.
Yeah.
So it's probably the greatest hack ever because it keeps my overall calorie count down. You're a little bit less efficient at processing protein as far as I understand as you get older. So it's like I maybe overshoot a little more than I need to, but it helps me keep my lean mass up. I feel great. Yeah. My blood sugar's stable. I'm not starving all day. And I don't really try that hard. Like I just went to, another country for a week and ate and drank my way across the whole thing. And it was like no big deal, right? Who cares?
Yeah.
But I'm consistent when I'm home.
You're consistent. And the other thing about you love your work. And I think people often underestimate how much of a part of wellness that is.
Well, that's a great point.
I have a lot of patients that come in and they're like, they're so stressed and they don't feel good and they hate their job. They don't leave because either they make really good money or it's, some reason where they're kind of stuck there. And they'll usually tell me, they're like, I know I'm so stressed because I hate my job, and that will take its toll on the body. And then, sometimes they get tired and then they don't go to the gym, and then it interferes with their other being consistent elsewhere. So, I think it is a lot easier to take care of yourself when you're doing something that you don't hate. Yeah. You don't have to, I wish that everyone could find, the thing that like gets them up and but it might take you a while to find that for some people. You were lucky to stumble into it, right off the bat.
Yeah, as you're thinking that, I've often heard willpower described as like a muscle, right? And it just has a finite amount of energy in it. Or maybe it's a glass of water, right? Is another analogy. And like, if you're having to use most of your willpower just to get up and commute through traffic and go sit at a job that you hate because you have a lifestyle that you have to support, right? You have a mortgage, maybe you have kids or whatever those things are. You're probably not going to have a lot left in the tank, to then motivate yourself to go do some other things that you need to be doing, like is to keep yourself healthy. So I didn't think about it that way, but to your point, if all of your willpower is being used just to go to do the thing that you have to do to pay your bills, it's probably going to be a bit tougher, to do the other things in your life that need to be done. So great point. I don't know what the solution is. I mean, Maybe you invest in an alloy so you can wake up every morning and like, that's my favorite thing about it.
Maybe. And you get that community. I mean, it could also be, a job's one thing. It could be you're not in a great relationship, or there's, and that could be like a sexual relationship, a romantic relationship, or that could be like a parent, there's other factors in life where I think, again, your analogy was great. If you're using a lot of willpower in some aspect of your life and you might have, tapped out, it might be harder to stay on track with things. So I think, if you're listening to that and you're like, wow, I know that that's my issue, you get support, and you have that support help you figure out how are we going to navigate through this.
Yeah.
And I think in everyone's wellness, I always like to ask people like, hey, what does yours look like? Everyone's going to be different, right? So what you shared might work for some people. It might not. It's just good to, figure out.
What worked for me.
Yeah. And I think it sounds like a great plan. But yeah, so I think if you're listening and you're like, wow, I'm having a really hard time like sticking to whatever I want my wellness routine to be, maybe look at, is there something else that's like sucking your willpower somewhere else? I like that. I like that analogy.
That's a good point.
It's a good one.
Sometimes those, we often talk about doing hard things is good for people, right? But
yes.
Usually like in my history, I'd be speaking to fitness people. And so they might be saying something like, well, I'll get in the cold tub first thing in the morning. I'm like, no. To your point, that's not what I'm talking about. You already like doing those things. So does it suck to get in a cold tub when it's cold outside? Sure. But you already like it. You know what's really hard for someone like you? It might be repairing that tough relationship with your sibling, right? It might be you digging in on your marriage a little bit more. It may be fixing some shortcomings that you have because you can't seem to find a partner that's the person you want. Like you're not the person you're looking for. So you've got to become that person, right? And so that's the really tough work. So I think to your point, Doc, when you zoom out and you look at like, where are these deficiencies in my life? You probably can't attack them all at once. Let me start with the most obvious one and try to fix it, and it will cascade into other parts of your life for sure. Yeah.
And sometimes that stuff's not, as you said, that stuff is not easy to even look at sometimes. Sometimes you're like, no, it can't be that. It can't be that. But it is, I always tell my patients, if they've been struggling with something physically, or their body's not performing how they want it to, or they're not healing like they want it to, and they've tried and they are being consistent with some of these things, or they can't, it is good to take a step out and kind of look at what are some of these other factors that could be affecting health or affecting routine.
Well, I'm glad, again, the fact that you even ask those questions and do that is amazing. I don't think that's happening in a lot of places. So again, props to you.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I put this podcast out, because I want people that are struggling with their health in some capacity to kind of like open up their brains a little bit. Be like, hey, well, maybe think about this. Have you thought about this? Because maybe that could be something that you're missing, right? I think when most of us think about wellness, we think about exercise and we think about what goes into our body. And those are very big, important parts of being well. But there are so many other things, like the things we've been chatting about. There's, do you like your job? Is your relationship healthy? Do you have a spiritual connection? So wellness can look different. And I think there are aspects that can affect our wellness that sometimes we don't even realize are having an impact on our body's ability to stay well.
Yeah. Great point.
Yeah. So maybe some cool things you could add to the community at some point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, look, we love to align with people like you in our local communities. Like if there's a franchisee that has someone around, or a therapy, therapy office or something like that, it's super important, or a dietitian, because like at some stage, all of these things have some behavioral component to them, right? At the end of the day, there's some kind of a block, whether it's mental, behavioral, environment, situational, whatever that may be. There's something keeping you from getting to a healthier place. And sometimes it's not obvious, as to your point, but if you can identify it and just start to fix what you can and move in the right direction, that's what life's all about. It's not about home runs all the time. It's like base hits, right? Like one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. How do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. So if you're in a place right now where you're listening to this and you're like, that sounds great, but like, I'm not in shape already. I don't want to eat 2 million grams of protein. It's like, that's not what it's about.
You don't have to, by the way. You don't have to eat all that.
Yeah, you don't.
It might not be for you. Yeah.
It might not work for you at all. Maybe you want to be vegan. Hey, whatever. As long as you're getting to a healthier place, but don't be discouraged by the length or the size of the journey. If you just aim as high as you can and bring everything you have to bear to better yourself in whatever way, even if you don't hit the original, big, hairy, audacious goal, that BHAG, moving in that direction, you will be infinitely better regardless of where you end up. So set a lofty goal, start knocking down small things or habits, or just, we're going to walk 10 minutes a day, or it doesn't matter. just move in that direction, right? If you get moving in that direction, I promise you it'll have positive effects. It will cascade into other areas of your life. And, we've seen it happen a million times where people, of course, in our environment, they address their physicality first, but they prove to themselves, I am a person that can show up to the gym consistently. Okay. And now I think of myself through a different lens. So what does that person choose as a lunch choice? Is it a hamburger and fries or is it a salad? Well, no, I'm a person that can show up to the gym. So I'm also a person that will eat a salad. And by the way, I'm also a person that has higher self-worth now because I love myself more. I'm proving it. So I'm not going to go out with these toxic type of people anymore, right? Or I'm not going to stay in this relationship, or I'm not going to stay in this job where I'm underappreciated or undercompensated, whatever those things are. And it might start in one of those other areas, but just start somewhere, aim high, move in that direction. You'll be infinitely better.
I love that. I think that is a perfect way to kind of end this show. That's a great piece of advice. So where can people find out if they're listening? We have listeners all over. If they're listening, where's the best place to go to see if there's an Alloy Fitness near them?
Yeah, just go to alloypersonaltraining.com and you can open up locations. And if we're not near you now, we probably will be soon because we have lots of locations coming in all over the country and we're moving quick. So, and look, if you need help with your health and fitness, obviously, if you can afford to hire a personal trainer, we're at a good value for that person that wants a trainer. I promise we'll treat you right and we'll help you. So thank you for the plug.
It's fantastic. So thank you so much. This was awesome. You guys go check that out. And like I said, if you are local and you want to participate in the little cross promotion we're doing, go check out, my Instagram stuff. We've got all that stuff there. So thank you so much, Rick. And we'll see everyone next week.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to connect with me on social media and leave a rating and/or a review. This helps grow the show so more people have access to this knowledge that leads to empowered healing. Love and light, and see you next week.